Dwayne Virgil gets it into Reese. Reese will bring it up the floor. 2 seconds, 1 second. Shot at the buzzer by Reese. It's good! It's good! He did it again! He did it again! He did it again! Reese does it again! Reese hits it at the buzzer! The Reese hits it at the buzzer! And the Racers are going dancing for the third time in a row! It's 62-61! What a miracle!
I'm Will Aubrey. It's time for another edition of the Improbability Engine. My buddy Joe Darnell is here with me. And Joe, as always, we start with our moment of what?
Yeah, and I'm going to go to the world of soccer, a place that I know you love to visit, the wonderful, magical world of soccer.
As most people know, soccer is on a list I have. Soccer, bad grammar, cats, University of Kentucky basketball, and serial killers.
He loves all of those things with a passion.
No.
So recently, something has happened in the world of soccer. Soccer, everybody knows, is the globe's most popular sport. Maybe not in America, but the rest of the world is enthralled with the game of soccer. And part of the growth of American soccer has been this idea that, okay, well, Americans need to develop talent. They need to have better players. They need to, maybe that's what they need to do. And I agree with that. And we've had some success. Some good players have come through. The best so far, Landon Donovan, who is considered the greatest American soccer player of all time. But he might have a little bit of company at the top of that hierarchy. This past week, there was an international break, which means that club teams shut down so that national teams can get together and play qualifying matches. And the CONCACAF region, which is where the U.S. is, had their own. Well, 2 games, the U.S. had lost the first 2 and were struggling at this point. They needed some wins. They needed some points to come out of this. And so they had games against Honduras and Panama. And in walks 18-year-old Christian Pulisic. Christian Pulisic, his dad was a soccer player in the NASL back in the 70s. And he is a starter for Borussia Dortmund in Germany, which is one of the top teams in Germany. And he's a starter on a team that's in the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League, which is the most prestigious club tournament in the world. This is a young man who, at the age of 18, has kind of put the world on notice that he is an up-and-coming star. He hasn't had as much experience on the U.S. men's national team, but that's changing. He's a starter now. He's doing whatever. So my moment of what? 2 games. Christian Pulisic had 4 assists and a goal. And you talk about how little scoring there is in soccer. This man, 4 assists and 1 goal in 2 games. This is a guy who absolutely is coming on. I'm going to tell you, an 18-year-old kid doing that in qualifying, it just made me go, what? Holy cow.
I hear you. My moment of what happened last night. Marilyn and I are sitting at home, and we're watching TV, and knock on the door. And so Marilyn's like, do you know who that is? No. but I will in a minute. So I get up and I go and I open the door. And it's the young women's group from our church. And they brought Marilyn and I some muffins. And they said, we brought you some muffins just to show you that we love you. And, of course, I said, we love you too. But I just... it's just an example of why we love our church and our church family. I've never been a part of a church that ever did things like that before, and it was, I was flabbergasted. So that's why it's my moment of what, because I was like, what? But
I can appreciate that.
Anyway, let's move on to Murray State basketball, and today we're discussing post players. I was going through last night Murray State's post players over the years, and, you know, it's hard coming up with names of post players who really stand out. Most any racer team you can look at has guards, okay?
Right.
And you can look at those guards and they stand out, but you have a hard time finding post players. Now, one that I did find that we had very recently that I suspect most people would overlook is Jarvis Williams. But he averaged 15 and 9, 15 points and 9 rebounds.
And all of that was within about 7 feet from the basket.
Absolutely. And I think he's clearly one of the best post players that the Racers have ever had.
Yeah, and honestly, I think there are two schools of thought whenever you talk about these all-time lists. You get people who succumb to recency bias, where they say, well, this guy's awesome. I saw him. He was incredible. He was, an amazing playmaker. He did all this. Then there are other people who are actively working against the recency bias, and I think they go too far the other way, so that if you bring up a modern player, a lot of times it just gets dismissed out of hand, and that shouldn't be done, because Jarvis Williams was one of the greatest big men in Murray State history, and the term big man, I don't even know how. The guy is only 6'6.5". I mean, he's not 6'8". He's not a big guy.
Well, now we're going with official height.
Oh, okay.
Official height.
Okay, well, officially he's a giant, but in reality he's, slightly above average kind of guy. What made him so incredible was
he could jump out of the gym.
And the thing that's exactly it. And the thing that's impressive about it is he would jump out of the gym. A lot of guys are 1 foot jumpers, meaning they have to kind of get a little bit of a running start to really get their full vertical. Jarvis Williams could jump over and over. He was just a pogo stick. He would jump high over and over again. He would sky and get rebounds and come directly back up and dunk it. He would do those things and it would make it look so easy. And honestly, it was anything but easy. Fantastic guy. And honestly, one of the nicest players that I've ever met. On senior night, my son's going to be upset that I'm telling this story. On senior night, we watched the team play, and it's his senior night, and they win the game, and we're going down there, and we're just, you don't really want it to end. That's really what it is with a lot of this. And you take my kids down there, and they've been to every game, and they love the guys, they love Cam, they love John, but my son loved watching Jarvis play. And my son's, middle schooler, and he's upset. He's really sad that it's over. And so we go and meet Jarvis, and it's really the culmination of the season for my son. I mean, this is the first time he's ever met him. We had gone to some away games, and we had seen him, and he had, pointed to us, and he recognized us. And my son started crying because his hero was graduating. He wasn't going to get to see him play anymore. And Jarvis, to his credit, gave him a big hug, came up and talked to him, said, "Don't cry, you're going to make me cry." He said, "Are you on Facebook? Hit me up on Facebook. We can talk there. We can send some messages." And he has. He's been very forthcoming about that. He'll talk. He'll send messages. He encouraged my son while he was going into high school and playing football. And, it's a testament to the quality guy that he is, that he would this was his senior night. It was his senior night. This was his moment that, he could be with his teammates. He could be with his family who's there, and instead he's spending time consoling my son who's crying because he's graduating. It's just an incredible guy.
I have a neat story about the previous year when they went to the CIT. Mm-hmm. Jarvis was on that team as well, mm-hmm. along with Cam Payne, and a fellow comes up to me. His grandson had been at the game, and he comes up to me after the game, and he was telling me about something his grandson said. He said, "My grandson told me," he said, "when I grow up, I'm going to be black and I'm going to be a racer."
You know what? More power to you, kid. That's all you can ask for. But really just a fantastic, and honestly, there are a lot of stories like that. I mean, and I'm not the only racer fan who has them. A lot of people have them.
Well, let me ask you about Terrell Miller. He's only been here one season.
Yeah.
I don't count him as a post player.
Yeah, I tend to do the same thing.
But if you look at his numbers, I don't know if we mentioned him among forwards last week or not.
We didn't. And a lot
so
of
let's mention him now. He's had a great year at Murray State. It's just 1 year.
Right.
I think it's too early to make a final determination.
I think that's probably right. I think he had a one of the best years ever for a forward. Especially in his first year. You don't get that very often. And when we talk about Jarvis Williams, that's one of the things you see with him. He's here for 2 years. You've got to make an impact immediately if you want to be considered one of the greats. And Jarvis Williams did that. Well, so far, Terrell Miller's done that. I mean,
right.
This is a guy who came in and was a key cog in a team that...
Now, it was mainly shooting threes.
Well, he shot a lot of threes, but towards the end of the season... On the interior, he was very effective as well. He realized what he had to do. He had to make that a real threat so that he could open up his three-point shooting from outside. And that's a big deal. I mean, you've got to be able to do both. If you're a dual threat, both of them become easier.
Now I'm going to go to another guy that we talked about last week when we were talking about forwards. But to me, you have to include him among post players, even though you can argue Chris Ogden was the post player.
Right.
On those teams, but Popeye Jones, I include him among post players because although he took 1 3 a game on
right.
average, and although he hit like 5 of them against Michigan State, although
which was incredible.
Put all of that aside, as far as I'm concerned, most of the work that he did was in the low post, rebounding the ball, and offensively, he had moves that nobody could guard, nobody could defend against.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what made Popeye so good was that everything he did was inherently deceptive. He was big. He's a big guy. I mean, he's 6'8", depending on what year, 270 pounds. But he moved so well for a guy who was 6'8", 270. I mean, he would be able to step out and set screens and had the ability then to roll to the basket or to pop a jumper. And that's incredible. But then you take into account his other skill set, soft hands and good feet. He was always in a good position, always knew how to receive the ball, went up smooth and clean and shot high percentage shots every time. There wasn't a time where you look at him and you go, well, he's got a good shot of missing this. Every shot he took, you believed it had a chance to go in. And I think that's a testament to his skill set, but also to his mental preparation. That's where he was good. He knew who was guarding him. He knew what he had to do to beat them, and he did it over and over and over again. And he'd make small adjustments. The Michigan State game's a great example. Being guarded by a guy who was much taller, and frankly, all he would do is he'd get a position, get the ball, and move quicker than the guy who was bigger than him. He'd turn around and shoot before the guy could step up, take distance, and set his feet and jump and block his shot. That doesn't happen. You shouldn't be able to do that against an elite shot blocker. Popeye Jones could do it.
Now, I'm going to mention one more guy. I don't know if he belongs. I'm going to ask you what you think, and then I'll turn it over to you, and you can give me your guys. Okay. Dwayne Virgil. Does Dwayne Virgil belong?
Boy, that's a really good question. Dwayne Virgil's one of those guys. Dwayne Virgil, it's hard to look at the body of work of Dwayne Virgil and say, oh, there goes a guy who's absolutely elite.
Right.
But anybody who watched Dwayne Virgil play saw a player that could take over any game that he needed to. I mean, you just watch him. You watched him, and you just went, "Oh God, I don't know what to do with that."
You know what I remember most about him?
What's that?
Dwayne Virgil gets it into Reese. Reese brings it up the floor.
Which is,
he's the guy that threw the inbounds pass to Aubrey Reese on the "he did it again" shot.
And
that's what I remember about it.
That's tough because you think about it. This is a really incredible guy. I mean, he's so much more than what you would expect out of a player with what he brought into it. And you're talking about a guy he wasn't the biggest guy. Wasn't really the fastest guy. But you want to talk about a guy who got absolutely everything out of every ounce of athletic ability on every play.
And you can argue that although his numbers aren't that impressive, he played with such a group of talented players that there just wasn't that much left over.
That's the hardest part whenever you look at Dwayne Virgil. He was a great player on a team full of really dang good players. I mean, just fantastic players. It's hard to look at it. You wonder, we talk about Terrell Miller now, you wonder what Terrell Miller's stats would have looked like if you swapped Dwayne Virgil and Terrell Miller in their teams. If Miller's the number one offensive player in the post, what do his numbers look like? And the answer is I have no idea, but I'd love to see it.
Now, I want to mention one more thing, and he's not a post player, okay?
Okay.
But when looking at these post players, I noticed that when he was a senior, Vincent Rainey averaged 8 rebounds a game. That's just insane. That's just crazy.
From a 6'4", I call him a small forward. This is a guy, I watched him guard 5 positions in college. You want to talk about a guy, I watched him guard centers. Yeah. I watched him guard point guards. It should not have happened, and he did it at a high level. Incredible player.
So who you got?
A couple of older guys. First one I want to come up with is Jim Jennings. Now, Jim Jennings played with Stu Johnson on the first NCAA tournament team, which kind of makes him special. Both were forwards. Jim was the post, from what I can tell. And again, if any of this stuff is incorrect,
I think that might have been the second NCAA tournament team. What year are you talking about?
66. Against Loyola.
Okay.
Is that not the first one? I thought it was the first one.
That would be the first one. I'm thinking it was 64 instead of 60.
Oh, 64. Sorry, 64.
Okay. Yeah, that would be
that
the
was
first
his senior
year. For
year.
some reason, I was thinking Jennings was a little later.
Right.
Go on.
Okay, so on that team was Jim Jennings and Stu Johnson. Now, both were big guys. We talked about Stu Johnson last week because he was more of a shooter. Okay. He had an outside shot, although he did average 16 points and 12, almost 13 rebounds a game, which would put you in the conversation for, that guy's a post player, but had an amazing outside shot and actually made his career in the ABA afterwards by being a 6'8" guy who could step out and shoot the three. Jim Jennings a little different. He was more of a traditional post. Went his freshman year, back when freshmen weren't eligible to play, played his freshman year on the freshman team at the University of Louisville, called Cal Luther up and said, hey, you know what, I don't like it here. I want a more traditional college experience. This is a commuter campus. If you got a spot for me, I'll come and play for you. And Cal Luther, to his credit, said, it doesn't matter if I have a spot. Come and play for me. I'll make room. And Jim Jennings comes to Murray State and is one of the most dominant big men in Murray State history. This is a guy who averaged 19 points a game and 16 rebounds for his 3-year career.
That's incredible.
There's no shot clock. There's no three-point line. This is like dead ball baseball. This guy's averaging almost 20 and 16 a game. Just unreal.
And he's a great guy. Was a great guy. I got to talk to him a couple of times at Hoopalooza events at Murray State, and then a year or two ago he passed away, and that was very sad, of course, but great player, great guy.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that if you're a true Murray State fan, which we both are, you look at certain players and certain coaches and certain times, and you go, okay, this was a pivotal moment. And 1964, that was a pivotal moment for Murray State basketball. I mean, you can look at 1964 as one of those cusp years between the Oklahoma A&M, teams, the Texas Westerns that were, 66 is when that happened, but those classic teams where you go, okay, this is a different era of college basketball where there's teams that you watch and you go, wow, do they even have basketball anymore? And in some cases the answer is no. To the modern era, which you see the late 60s to 70s with the UCLA teams, the 80s, 90s, and today. If you didn't have success then, there were a lot of programs that just ceased to exist or dropped down a level or disappeared altogether. I think if you look at what Stuart Johnson and what Jim Jennings did in that 64 team is they took the classic NAIB success that Murray State had, the small school national championship type things, where Murray State's one of those teams, the North-South cage games in Racer Arena, those 1940s and 50s teams that were so good, and they said, you know what, Murray State can be relevant on a national standings against big boys in the NCAA tournament. And I think that's one of those points, and you got to look at Jim Jennings to do it. 6'7" guy, left-handed, could shoot and score, could rebound with the best of them. And they played the defending national champions in the first round in Carbondale and gave them all they wanted, which was incredible at the time. And you got to tip your cap to a guy who does that.
Just a little after that, Dick Cunningham. Dick
Cunningham, another guy that, everybody has a story about Dick Cunningham. He's one of those guys that, if you went to school around him or if they called him Lurch, 6'10" guy, which is skyscraper sized. I mean, that's as big as it gets. And just a fantastic basketball player. Didn't have the professional career that I think he probably could have had. Went to Milwaukee and was the backup for some stiff named Lou Alcindor. I don't know who that is. But, you just look at him and you go, this guy was, fantastic basketball player. Size was unrivaled. This is a guy that was huge for 1960s basketball. And, coming out of Ohio, coming to Murray State, playing with Claude Verdon, and you just get this guy who, we talk about the beginning of the modern era of basketball. We were talking about it off air, that modern era development. A lot of it was tied in with the ABA.
Right.
You get a development of two different leagues, and you get different players coming up who might not have been successful before, but are successful now. This is a guy that, he's a traditional NBA post, played with, Claude Verdon, who was an ABA draftee and, could have played at a different level. But it's just crazy.
You mentioned Claude Verdon.
Yeah.
Is he on your list?
He's on my list. Yeah, he's more of the
kind of a hybrid.
Kind of a hybrid. One of those guys that you could just give him the ball and he'll find a way to score. Averaged almost 21 points a game for his career. OVC Player of the Year in 69. Didn't have a great year in 70, but one of those guys that was really fantastic, a really great Murray State player. Unfortunately, had his playing career interrupted. Went and joined the Army, did some service there, came out and hurt his knee, and was never the player. There's not the same kind of technology nowadays as they had that they had back then. I mean, if you blew your knee out, you were just done. There was nothing else you could do. You couldn't run. You couldn't jump. Really cut his career short. But those two guys, we talk about. We've had discussions. In the last one, we talked about posts versus hybrid forwards. How do you do it? Well, some guys are better bigs, and some guys are better. They can step out and do some things. And really, the best teams have had guys that did both. And we talked about, Jim Jennings and Stu Johnson, which they are the ultimate. I mean, you got a 6'8" guy who can step out and shoot threes, and you got a 6'7" guy who's a dominant post player. Dick Cunningham's another one of those guys, 6'10", big, strong guy, fantastic player. And then he played with Claude Verdon, who was the more athletic outside runaround. It's just a fantastic matchup. And Dick Cunningham's got to be on the list. Lurch has got to be in there.
Another guy who doesn't really fit the spot as far as size, but if you get 355 rebounds in a single season, you've got to go on the list. That's Gary Hooker.
Gary Hooker.
I mean, he's 6'6".
Gary Hooker's a legend, and I'll tell you why. You don't often see a starter and a really high-end starter in the SEC transfer to play 1 year at Murray State. And that's what Gary Hooker did. Gary Hooker had a great career at Mississippi State. He was very, very good at Mississippi State. Whenever Coach Green left Mississippi State, the SEC Coach of the Year leaves Mississippi State to come coach at Murray State, which is unheard of. I mean, that's completely ridiculous. If you tried to pitch that to somebody, they're going to say, no, it's not believable. We have to do something different.
And I asked Ron why he did that, and he said, my alma mater needed me. I answered the call.
And you know what? I think as Racer fans, we can all be very thankful that he did.
Absolutely.
We talk about we talked about earlier, the certain pivot points in history that have changed where Murray State is to get Murray State to where it's at. We talked about that first appearance in the early 60s in the NCAA tournament, saying, oh yeah, Murray State can play with the big boys. When Coach Green came in and he had Gary Hooker, all of a sudden it showed people around the country this Murray State team is going to be successful. They've got a history and a tradition that feeds back. It comes back for it. And, Gary Hooker's one of those guys. Undersized player. Not the biggest guy in the world.
Kind of a contemporary of his.
Yep.
Do you count Ricky Hood as a post?
Boy, that's tough. And not watching those guys play makes it really difficult on those two.
We talked about Ricky Hood last week some, I believe, as a forward. I think that's where he probably fits.
I think that's right. When you.
But he was a beast.
Oh gosh, yeah, and was able to again modernize the types of players that Murray State had. It's funny to see that, you look at Gary Hooker, guy averaged 18.5 points a game, 12.5 rebounds a game, and was as good a basketball player as Murray State's had. He just a fantastic basketball player, athletic, strong, skilled. Then you got Ricky Hood, who's another guy that, you look at Coach Green, you go, Coach, how the heck did you get these guys here? He could have played in a lot of different places. He comes to Murray State. That to me is a big deal. Look at those guys.
I talked to Ron about some of the guys that he recruited, and he mentioned Lamont Sleets and also talked about Glenn Green. He said, people looked at Sleets and they said, well, he can't shoot, he can't play guard. We played him at forward. And they looked at Green and, they said that he wasn't strong enough to play forward.
Yep.
Well, we played him at guard.
Right.
So Ron definitely was able to think outside the box.
Well, and I think that's been, if there is a coaching mentality that can be traced from Ron Green to today, it's that if you want to be successful at Murray State, you have to embrace what's not necessarily the norm. You look at the players that have come through, and you talk about Glenn Green. Glenn Green's a great example. This dude's 6'6", and thin, and he's an in-state player. You don't know exactly what he's going to do. Great career. But you take him, you take Lamont Sleets, you take all these guys, Kenny Cornbread Hammonds, you take all these guys and you mash them up together, and what doesn't look like a cohesive team in the traditional sense. There's not a 5 that looks like a 5. There's not a 4 that looks like a 4. There's not a 1 that looks like a 1. You just kind of put them all, you go, I don't know, man. I don't know how you're going to pull it off. Coach Green was able to put them on the floor and win a lot of games with them against some really good teams because he embraced the non-traditional and non-expected roles. And these guys are great examples. Ricky Hood's a great example of that. 6'6" guy that you look at and you go, well, he's not quite big enough but absolute springs for legs, incredible player. And Coach Green would put players like that in position to be successful. I think the best coaches since Coach Green at Murray State have done something very similar. They'll use something that's out of their time to maximize the impact of some of these players that just kind of fall through the cracks for other schools.
Moving along.
Yeah.
Yesterday, Rochelle Turner was announced as the new head women's basketball coach at Murray State. She had been the head girls coach at Murray High for 21 years. I've known Rochelle for all of that period of time. I think it was a tremendous choice by Alan Ward, and I think that she will be great for Murray State. One of the back when I first started doing radio here in the area, doing basketball games, I did both Callaway and Murray High games. A lot of people don't know that because I'm so identified with Callaway. But one of the great moments in my career as far as just, exciting, thrilling ball games was when her team won the regional championship in 1996.
Right.
That was an incredible moment, and she did a great job with that team. She's always done a great job with her teams, and there are people who are fans of Murray High's rivals who may not, some of them are Callaway fans,
right?
But some of them may be fans of other schools in the area.
When you win a lot of games, all of a sudden a lot of temes count you as a rival. I'm just saying.
That's right. That's right. There may be some fans who think they know her, but they don't. She's really a tremendous person, one of the best people that it's ever been my pleasure to know, and I've always been proud that she's been a member of our community. I've been to practices that she's had. I will always recall, and this is probably close to 20 years ago, at one of her practices, one of her players hurt her hand. And Rochelle's just like a mom calling her over and tending to her. I thought that was tremendous. I've sat behind her bench, and people see her yell and scream, but they don't understand. They don't realize what she's saying.
Right.
It's encouraging things that she's yelling.
Right.
She's not calling them names. She's not doing anything like that. She's always encouraging them, always telling them how good they are and how good they can be. It's never anything negative, and I hold her in extremely high regard, and I think that she will be a great success at Murray State. And there's a chance that this could be a home run hire where people start actually coming in throngs to Murray State women's basketball games.
Let me address the elephant in the room on this one.
Okay.
A Division I basketball team just hired a high school coach who coached at a 1A school in the far western part of Kentucky. Those are all true statements. None of that can be disputed. But let me tell you how this is different. Rochelle Turner is as good an X's and O's coach as I've ever seen.
Absolutely. That's what Amber Guffey said.
She's
her assistant.
As a leader of a program, you'll find nobody who surpasses what she does caring for her players, caring for their well-being, not just on the floor, not how many points they score, their genuine well-being. You'll never find anybody who surpasses Rochelle Turner on that one. Never.
Agreed.
And as a personal character, you're not going to find anybody who can surpass Rochelle Turner's personal character, her ideas of responsibility, not just for her, not just for her assistant coaches, but for her players. And that responsibility thread is one that I've heard in different ways in a lot of different interviews with her. It's exactly what you want out of a program. You want a coach who teaches responsibility, because responsibility can mean responsibility to yourself, getting the most out of your talent, doing the things that you need to do to get better, responsibility to your teammates, showing up to practice ready to play, helping them along, sacrificing for the team, doing what needs to be done for the team to be better, and responsibility to the coaches who trust you, and not just coaches, but your parents, your grandparents, the administrators, the school. You take on responsibility when you become a D1 athlete, and I think those three things, she is absolutely far overqualified for a Division I basketball coaching job. Now, does that mean it's a risk-free proposition? No.
No coaching
Every coach is a risky proposition. You never know what's going to happen because there's so many moving pieces in that. There are variables that are well beyond the ability of a coach to control. But in the ones that you can control, she has got that in spades.
And one final thing about Murray State sports. Dondre Griffin is transferring.
Yeah,
from the men's basketball team.
And not overly surprising. You hate to see him go. You like to see these kids stay a little bit longer. A three-star recruit out of high school, coming out of Knightdale in North Carolina. And let's be really clear about this. There is no animosity amongst anybody. He's not angry. He was posting very classy and thankful things to Murray State. He's had a lot of positive interactions with fans. Even though he was only here a year, he's had positive interactions with fans, and he still does. The coaching staff still like him. He still likes the coaching staff. He just wanted a different place. It wasn't what he expected in his first year. He struggled, had some injury issues, never really seemed like he got in the flow in college, and that happens. And this is an era of basketball where this stuff happens. We talk about Jim Jennings. Nobody knew he transferred because freshmen didn't matter. Freshmen didn't matter then because they didn't play varsity. Nowadays, completely different setup. We've got social media. We've got all this information, all this recruiting data. You see a guy leave, and you make assumptions about why, and you try to come up with some sort of reasoning behind it. And sometimes it's just because an 18-year-old kid made a decision and it wasn't the best decision for them and they need to move on. And you have to respect that.
That's okay.
That's okay. I wish him the best going forward. I really do.
Anything else on sports?
Boy, it's going to be an eventful off season for basketball just to see how things develop. I know on the recruiting front there's some talk of a couple players that are they going to go with a JUCO big? Is there going to be a D1 transfer? Are they going to try to pick up another guard since the Griffin transfer?
Will there be other transfers?
Will there be other transfers? And the answer is
we don't know.
I don't
know. Final Four this weekend. I'm pulling for Gonzaga.
You said it right.
But South Carolina, North Carolina, that would be an intriguing final.
Yeah, I have a real problem with North Carolina being there because of their NCAA trouble, their academic problems.
But, there's genius in that.
Yeah, there's genius in cheating the system and getting away with it.
Well, I mean,
let's not celebrate it, Will.
I understand what you're saying. On the other hand, yes, they admit that they had a fake class or two or four.
For 20 years.
Yes, for 20 years. But they didn't provide an improper benefit to athletes because other kids were allowed to take those fake classes too. And that's the argument that they make to the NCAA.
And I think that's the reason why I don't like it, because they had reasoned that part out, and that just makes it really, really dictated.
Well, now that's a good point. That's a good point. That brings to a close this edition of the Improbability Engine.